On February 11th, something shifted, not in the natural but in the unseen realm. This was not a random date, and what happened was not subtle. God says a decision you made recently sent a signal into the spiritual realm, and that signal was strong enough to disrupt patterns that had been in place far longer than you realize. You may have thought it was a private moment, a quiet resolve, or even a hesitant step forward. But heaven did not see it as small. The unseen realm responded immediately, because decisions made in faith do not stay contained in the natural. They move. They provoke response. And this is where the urgency of this message begins, because what shifted on February 11th is now approaching a moment of outcome. This is not a general word. This is not a comforting message meant only to soothe. This is a warning wrapped in mercy. God is making it clear that the decision you made recently altered the direction of spiritual momentum around your life. Something that had been delayed, resisted, or suspended was touched by that choice. But now Archangel Michael issues a warning that carries weight. What happens in the next few minutes will either restore everything that was held back, or it will lock the delay in place. This is not about fear. This is about timing. Heaven moves in moments, and this moment is one of them. Many people misunderstand how the unseen realm operates. They assume that change happens slowly, gradually, over long seasons. But there are hinge moments, brief windows where alignment or hesitation determines whether a process accelerates or stalls. February 11th opened one of those windows. The decision you made was the key that turned the lock, but the door itself has not fully opened yet. It is standing between movement and pause. That is why this message carries urgency. Not because God is impatient, but because outcomes are close. You may be wondering why things intensified instead of easing after you made that decision. Why pressure increased. Why doubts became louder. Why distractions multiplied. This is not coincidence. When a decision disrupts the unseen realm, resistance does not always retreat quietly. Sometimes it tests whether the authority behind the decision was real or emotional, temporary or anchored. Archangel Michael warns that this is where many people lose momentum, not because they chose wrong, but because they underestimated what their choice activated. God says the decision you made recently was not about behavior alone. It was about alignment. It told the unseen realm what you were agreeing with and what you were no longer tolerating. That is why this message matters now. The next few minutes are not symbolic language. They represent a real spiritual response window. Heaven is attentive. Resistance is watching. And your posture in this moment carries weight. This is not about perfection. It is about response. There are moments when heaven looks for consistency, not effort. Stillness, agreement, and trust matter more now than striving. Archangel Michael's warning is not loud because danger is winning, but because victory is near enough to be influenced. Delay only becomes permanent when agreement with delay replaces faith. Restoration becomes immediate when alignment is reaffirmed. God is drawing a clear connection between the title of this message and your current reality for a reason. February 11th was a shift. The decision you made was the trigger. The unseen realm responded. And now, the next few minutes determine whether what moved behind the scenes is allowed to manifest fully or is paused by hesitation. This is not manipulation. This is invitation. Heaven does not force outcomes. It responds to alignment. If you feel a quiet urgency as you listen, that is not anxiety. That is recognition. Something in you already knows this moment matters. You did not stumble into this message by accident. Timing is part of how God speaks. And when messages arrive with clarity and weight like this, It is because a response is possible and needed. Archangel Michael stands as a messenger of protection and truth in moments of spiritual transition. His warning is not meant to alarm you, but to awaken you. What is at stake is not whether God is willing, He already is. What is at stake is whether agreement remains active. Restoration is not fragile, but it is responsive. Delay is not powerful, but it becomes fixed when left unchallenged. As this message opens, understand this clearly: nothing has been lost yet. The door is not closed. The shift that began on February 11th is still in motion. But motion requires direction. And direction is reinforced by what you choose now, internally, spiritually, and intentionally. This is why listening matters. This is why awareness matters. This is why these next few minutes are not ordinary. What you do with this awareness will either strengthen the movement already initiated or quiet it into stillness. And that is why this message begins here, with context, urgency, and truth. Because the unseen realm is not waiting for perfection. It is responding to alignment. And this moment, right now, is part of the response. The decision you made recently carried more weight than you were aware of at the time. It may not have looked dramatic on the surface. It may not have come with applause, confirmation, or instant results. But God says it was not ignored. In the unseen realm, it was registered as a defining moment. This is important to understand, because many people underestimate their own authority when they finally choose alignment over comfort, obedience over delay, or truth over familiarity. What felt like a quiet internal resolve to you was seen as a line being drawn. This decision was not impulsive. It was not random. It came after a season of pressure, confusion, and waiting. That is why it mattered. Heaven recognizes when a choice is made under weight. Archangel Michael reveals that decisions formed in pressure carry a different spiritual signature than decisions made in ease. They signal readiness. They signal maturity. They signal that a person is no longer asking if change is necessary, but declaring that stagnation is no longer acceptable. What many people do not realize is that the unseen realm responds more to decisions than to prayers alone. Prayer asks, decisions authorize. When you made this choice, something shifted in authority around your life. Patterns that had lingered were disrupted. Resistance that had grown comfortable was exposed. That is why everything did not instantly settle. Instead, movement began behind the scenes. And movement often creates friction before it creates manifestation. God says the decision you made was not about changing everything at once. It was about changing direction. Direction matters more than speed in the spiritual realm. A single decision can redirect months, or even years, of delay. But direction must be maintained. That is why this moment matters so much. The choice you made opened a path, but walking it requires agreement to remain active, not passive. There is a reason the enemy often responds after a decision, not before. Before a decision, delay feels normal. After a decision, resistance becomes obvious. This is not because you did something wrong. It is because you did something right. Archangel Michael warns that the pushback you may have felt was not meant to overpower you, but to test whether your decision was final or flexible. Many delays are not caused by lack of faith, but by wavering after alignment is initiated. God wants you to understand that heaven does not measure your decision by emotion, but by consistency. How you hold that decision internally matters. How you reinforce it through agreement matters. This is why awareness is being sharpened right now. The next few minutes are not about doing something dramatic. They are about recognizing the weight of what you already did and choosing not to retreat from it mentally or spiritually. If you have felt a temptation to second-guess yourself, to minimize the importance of your choice, or to assume nothing really changed, that is not your intuition. That is pressure attempting to neutralize momentum. Archangel Michael reveals that momentum does not disappear instantly. It fades when agreement weakens. That is why God is speaking now, before anything locks into place. This is also why you are being asked to engage with this message rather than listen passively. Engagement is not about the platform. It is about alignment. When you respond outwardly to a spiritual truth, you reinforce it inwardly. That is why moments like this matter. Agreement activates continuation. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to acknowledge it. Like this video, not as a habit, but as a signal of agreement. Share it if you sense it may reach someone standing in a similar moment of decision. Subscribe to the channel if you recognize that these messages are part of how God keeps you aware and aligned. And if you feel prompted, leave a comment, not to explain everything but simply to say, I choose alignment. These actions are not small. They are participatory. They reinforce what has already been set in motion. God is not asking you to revisit the decision you made. He is asking you to stand by it. Archangel Michael emphasizes that authority is maintained through stillness as much as action. You do not need to strive. You do not need to prove anything. You only need to remain aligned with what you already chose. The weight of your decision lies in its timing. It came when delay was close to becoming normalized. It came when waiting had begun to feel permanent. That is why heaven responded so quickly. This is also why the next few minutes are critical. They serve as a confirmation point. Will agreement remain, or will doubt attempt to renegotiate what was already settled? God says this clearly. The decision you made was enough to shift things. Nothing more is required to initiate movement. What is required now is steadiness, awareness, refusal to shrink back mentally. Restoration is not earned, it is entered. Delay is not forced, it is accepted. And the difference between the two often lies in moments like this. You are not being rushed. You are being positioned. This is not pressure. It is proximity. Something is close. That is why clarity is increasing. That is why this message feels weighty. And that is why your response matters now more than later. The unseen realm reacted faster than you realize. The moment your decision was sealed, movement began in places you cannot see but can feel. That is why the atmosphere around you subtly changed. That is why thoughts intensified. That is why emotions surfaced that you thought were already settled. God says this reaction was not random. It was immediate. In the spirit, decisions carry sound. And when your decision was released, it created a disturbance that could not be ignored. Archangel Michael reveals that spiritual systems respond instantly to authority. They do not wait for confirmation from the natural realm. They respond to alignment. That is why pressure followed your choice instead of peace. Peace comes after authority stabilizes. Pressure comes when authority is tested. This is a pattern many misunderstand. They assume peace should arrive first, and when it doesn't, they assume something went wrong. But God says pressure often appears when something went right. The unseen realm reacted because something that had been allowed for a long time was suddenly challenged. Patterns do not release quietly when they are confronted. Resistance does not announce defeat without first attempting negotiation. That is why familiar doubts resurfaced. That is why distractions increased. That is why the temptation to slow down, revisit, or soften your decision appeared almost immediately. These were not new attacks. They were exposure. God says exposure is a sign that authority is active. What was hidden becomes visible when light enters. What was comfortable becomes restless when agreement is withdrawn. Archangel Michael explains that the reaction you felt was not meant to overpower you, but to observe you. The unseen realm was watching to see if your decision was momentary or rooted. Consistency is what seals shifts. This is where many people misunderstand the nature of spiritual movement. They think once something shifts, it should feel complete. But most shifts begin invisibly and stabilize through response. That is why this moment matters so much. The unseen realm has already reacted. The question now is not whether something moves, but whether it will be allowed to settle in its new position. God says the reaction you felt was confirmation, not resistance winning. It confirmed that your decision carried enough weight to disrupt established patterns. That alone tells you something important. Your authority is real. Your alignment was recognized. And restoration did not move further away. It moved closer. But closeness requires awareness. Archangel Michael warns that the test now is subtle. It is not dramatic failure. It is quiet disengagement. It is drifting into distraction. It is assuming that because something has shifted, attention is no longer required. This is how momentum fades. Not through attack, but through neglect. That is why God is speaking with clarity now, before anything solidifies in the wrong direction. There is a reason this message reaches you at this exact point. Heaven does not speak urgently unless something is still flexible. This is not about rushing you. It is about anchoring you. The unseen realm has already reacted. Now it is watching for reinforcement. Reinforcement does not mean effort. It means agreement without wavering. God says your awareness in this moment is more powerful than action later. What you acknowledge internally strengthens what has already begun externally. That is why listening matters. That is why staying present matters. That is why these minutes carry weight. Something is being finalized not by force but by consent. Archangel Michael reveals that when restoration is close, confusion often tries to speak louder. Not because confusion is strong, but because clarity is threatening. You may feel pulled in multiple directions mentally. That is not because you are unsure. It is because your decision narrowed the path, and resistance prefers options over commitment. Hear this clearly. Nothing you felt after your decision invalidates it. Pressure does not cancel authority. Emotion does not undo alignment. Questions do not erase commitment. What matters is what you agree with now. This is where restoration is either reinforced or delayed, not by punishment, but by posture. Before moving forward, receive this blessing with intention. Type "I stand firm" in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 483 is now activated. This is not a ritual of superstition. It is a declaration of agreement. Agreement strengthens momentum. This moment you are standing in is not only about you. It is about the souls God is reaching through this message. When Jesus spoke of seed, he was speaking directly to hearts like yours, saying, "What you release becomes a harvest I multiply." I feel led to tell you plainly, when you give into this work, you are placing oil into a lamp that keeps burning in dark places. Your support through super thanks, membership, or PayPal is not a donation. It is a prophetic response to what God is doing right now. The PayPal link is in the description, and a QR code may be flashing on your screen, because obedience should be easy when the window is open. Do not miss this moment of alignment by delaying what God is prompting. I speak blessing over every giver, that your seed returns pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Act now, and let heaven record your obedience. What you need to understand now is this: the delay you experienced was never about punishment. God was not withholding. Heaven was not displeased. Archangel Michael makes this clear because many people misinterpret delay as rejection, and that misunderstanding alone has caused more people to abandon alignment than any external resistance ever could. Delay is often assumed to mean no, when in reality it frequently means not yet stabilized. There is a difference, and that difference changes how you respond in moments like this. God says the delay you encountered was strategic. It was not designed to frustrate you, but to fortify you. There are doors that cannot open fully until the person standing before them can remain steady when they do. Restoration without stability often collapses under its own weight. That is why some things pause before they move. Not because God is uncertain, but because consistency must be established before expansion can be sustained. The unseen realm operates with precision. When a shift begins, there is often a brief holding period, not to stop movement, but to measure agreement. Heaven watches how a person interprets delay. Do they internalize it as failure, or do they remain anchored in trust? Archangel Michael explains that this response determines whether delay becomes temporary or prolonged. Delay itself is neutral. Meaning is what gives it power. You were never being corrected. You were being strengthened. The pause you experienced created space for discernment. It revealed where your expectations were tied to timing rather than alignment. God allowed that space not to test your worth, but to refine your posture. This is why awareness matters now. When you stop mislabeling delay, you stop partnering with discouragement. Many people assume that if God were truly pleased, everything would move quickly and smoothly. But Scripture and spiritual law reveal something different. The most significant transitions often include moments of stillness. Stillness is not stagnation, it is positioning. Archangel Michael reveals that stillness allows unseen structures to realign without collapsing the visible ones prematurely. God says the delay was also protective. There were elements around you that needed to shift before restoration could safely manifest. Had everything moved sooner, it would have required constant defense instead of sustained peace. Heaven is more interested in permanence than speed. That is why the unseen realm sometimes holds momentum just long enough for you to grow comfortable with authority, not urgency. This is where clarity replaces confusion. You were not being ignored. You were being prepared. The delay was not evidence of distance. It was evidence of care. God did not rush what He intends to last. And what He is restoring in your life is meant to remain, not fluctuate. Archangel Michael warns that when people misunderstand delay, they often attempt to compensate with effort. They strive, overthink, and exhaust themselves trying to move what is already in motion. This creates spiritual fatigue, not acceleration. God never asked you to push. He asked you to stay aligned. A distinction matters now more than ever. The delay also exposed something important: how quickly doubt tries to fill silence. Silence is not absence. It is space. And space reveals what you lean on when reassurance is removed. God allowed that exposure so it could be addressed before restoration fully manifests. What you are experiencing now is not setback. It is cleanup. You may have noticed that during the delay, certain attachments loosen. Certain expectations soften. Certain fears surfaced and then lost their grip. That was not regression. That was refinement. The unseen realm was adjusting conditions so that when movement resumed, it would not be easily disrupted. God says this clearly: delay does not disqualify you. It does not reset progress. It does not cancel authority. Delay only becomes damaging when it is interpreted incorrectly. When delay is met with trust, it becomes a bridge. When delay is met with fear, it becomes a wall. The difference is not timing, it is agreement. Archangel Michael emphasizes that your recent decision corrected the direction delay was moving. What once felt endless became temporary. What once felt heavy became flexible. That is why this moment carries such weight. The delay no longer defines the situation. Your alignment does. This part of the message is meant to release you from self-blame. You did not miss God. You did not wait too long. You did not fail a test. The delay served its purpose, and that purpose has now been fulfilled. What comes next depends not on revisiting the past, but on recognizing what the delay was, and what it was not. God says you are no longer in the phase of preparation through waiting. You are in the phase of confirmation through alignment. The pause did what it needed to do. Now awareness, steadiness, and trust determine how smoothly restoration unfolds. Do not rush ahead mentally. Do not look back emotionally. Remain present. This is where peace begins to replace pressure. This is where clarity quiets confusion. And this is where delay loses its voice. The delay was never punishment. It was positioning. And now, positioning is giving way to movement. Now we come to the warning Archangel Michael is emphasizing most strongly. The next few minutes matter more than you think. These minutes are not symbolic language meant to sound dramatic. They are decisive. They are a convergence point where movement either continues forward or pauses long enough to become difficult to restart. God says this clearly because awareness itself is part of alignment. When heaven highlights time, it is because outcome is near enough to be influenced. Archangel Michael warns that moments like this do not announce themselves with chaos. They often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary time. Nothing on the outside may look urgent, yet everything on the inside is being weighed. This is how many people miss spiritual turning points. They expect urgency to feel loud, emotional, or intense. But true spiritual urgency often feels calm, clear, and still. It asks for presence, not panic. The next few minutes are about posture, not performance. God is not watching to see what you do outwardly. He is observing what you agree with inwardly. Agreement is what seals direction. This is why distraction is more dangerous now than doubt. Doubt can be confronted. Distraction simply drifts. Archangel Michael warns that drifting during a decisive window is how delay becomes fixed without resistance ever needing to fight. Heaven is not asking you to analyze your entire life right now. It is asking you to remain aligned with what has already been revealed. Overthinking in moments like this often looks spiritual, but it is not obedience. Obedience is simple. It is quiet. It is steady. The unseen realm responds to steadiness faster than it responds to intensity. God says the next few minutes are not about choosing between many options. They are about not reopening a decision that has already been made. Reconsideration is the subtle form of retreat. Archangel Michael explains that many people do not reverse direction intentionally. They simply start questioning what they already settled. This creates spiritual hesitation, and hesitation is the doorway through which delay re-enters. Silence also carries weight in moments like this. Not silence as peace, but silence as disengagement. When awareness is offered and then ignored, that is still a response. Heaven registers response even when it feels passive to you. That is why God is speaking plainly now. He wants clarity, not confusion. Presence, not pressure. The warning is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to protect what is already in motion. Restoration is close enough to require guarding. Delay is close enough to require refusing. Archangel Michael's role in moments like this is to stand at the threshold and say, "Pay attention. Something is being decided." God says you do not need to strive to make the right choice. You already did. What is being asked now is that you do not undo it mentally. Thoughts matter in moments like this. Not everything is to be thought, but not everything is abandoned. Agreement is formed by what you dwell on, not what briefly passes through your mind. If you feel an urge to distract yourself, scroll away, or postpone engagement with this message, recognize that urge for what it is, not temptation, but timing pressure. Resistance prefers delay over confrontation. It would rather you do nothing than reaffirm alignment. That is why Archangel Michael highlights minutes, not days. Delay often enters quietly and settles quickly if unchallenged. God says this moment is less about what happens next in your life and more about what is settled now in your spirit. When something is settled internally, it manifests externally without force. When something remains unsettled internally, the external reflects that instability. The unseen realm mirrors agreement. His warning also carries hope. If outcome were already fixed, there would be no reason to speak. The fact that this message is reaching you now means choice is still active. Restoration is still available. Delay is not locked in. But neutrality is not an option in moments like this. Even neutrality becomes a choice. Archangel Michael emphasizes that heaven is responding to awareness, not urgency. Take a breath. Be present. Let this moment register. God is not asking you to rush forward. He is asking you not to step backward. Stillness and alignment is more powerful than movement and uncertainty. These next few minutes are a confirmation point. They do not require words. They require agreement. They do not require effort. They require steadiness. What you hold on to now will shape what unfolds next. God says this is not about earning restoration. It is about allowing it. Resistance loses leverage when agreement is firm. Delay loses authority when alignment is maintained. And alignment is often confirmed in quiet moments like this, where nothing dramatic happens outwardly, but everything is decided inwardly. Archangel Michael's warning ends with this clarity. Do not underestimate simple obedience in decisive moments. Do not underestimate awareness. Do not underestimate the power of remaining aligned when nothing seems to be happening. Heaven is moving even when you are still. The next few minutes are not demanding something new from you. They are asking you to remain where you already are, in agreement, in trust, and in alignment. Restoration is still fully available. God wants this stated clearly and without hesitation because the mind often assumes that urgency means loss is near. But this urgency is not about what you might miss. It is about what is ready to return. Archangel Michael emphasizes that nothing essential has been taken from you beyond recovery. What shifted on February 11th did not weaken your position. It reopened access. Restoration did not move farther away when pressure increased. It moved closer. Many people misunderstand what restoration truly means. They imagine it as a return to how things once were. But God says restoration is not reversal. It is redemption. It does not simply replace what was delayed. It recalibrates it. What returns comes back strengthened, aligned, and better protected than before. It is why restoration often requires a moment of decision before it manifests. Alignment prepares you to carry what is restored without losing it again. God's definition of restoration is broader than comfort. It includes clarity where confusion once lived, stability where uncertainty lingered, peace where striving dominated. Archangel Michael reveals that restoration does not always announce itself with sudden change. Sometimes it begins with a quiet internal settling, a sense that something has locked into place correctly. That internal shift is often the first sign that restoration has been released. Nothing hath been lost permanently. Time has not disqualified you. Delay has not diminished your calling. God does not restore reluctantly. He restores completely. But restoration follows alignment, not urgency. This is why the previous warning mattered. Alignment keeps restoration intact. Without it, even restored things can feel unstable. You may be tempted to measure restoration by external signs alone. But God says the most important restorations begin internally. When fear releases its grip, when trust becomes natural again, when decision replaces hesitation, these internal restorations create the conditions for external change to follow naturally, without force. Archangel Michael explains that when restoration is close, the enemy often attempts to convince you that it is too late. That lie sounds logical. It sounds realistic. But it is false. Heaven is not bound by your timeline. Restoration is not limited by delay. It is released by agreement. And agreement is active now. This is why God is emphasizing availability. Restoration is not theoretical. It is not a distant promise. It is present, responsive, and waiting for confirmation through steadiness. You do not need to perform to unlock it. You need to remain aligned long enough for it to stabilize. God also wants you to release the idea that restoration must arrive dramatically to be real. Sometimes restoration arrives quietly, like a door opening without resistance. Sometimes it arrives as momentum returning where stagnation once ruled. Sometimes it arrives as peace that replaces anxiety without explanation. These are not small signs. They are evidence of unseen work completed. Archangel Michael warns against impatience disguised as faith. Wanting immediate proof can create pressure that restoration does not require. God is not asking you to monitor progress constantly. He is asking you to trust the process now in motion. Restoration accelerates when it is not interrogated. The restoration available to you is comprehensive. It addresses what was delayed, but it also corrects what allowed delay to linger. This is why it feels different. You are not returning to the same position, with the same vulnerabilities. You are stepping into a recalibrated version of what was promised, one that can withstand pressure without retreat. God says restoration does not come to prove anything to others. It comes to establish peace within you. External validation is not the goal. Stability is. When restoration arrives, it does not need to announce itself loudly. Its fruit speaks quietly but consistently. This is also why fear has no authority now. Fear suggests loss. Restoration confirms completion. Fear focuses on what could go wrong. Restoration focuses on what has already been secured. Archangel Michael encourages you to recognize when thoughts pull you back into old patterns of anticipation and anxiety. Those patterns are no longer aligned with where you are. God is not restoring pieces. He is restoring flow. What felt blocked is becoming accessible again. What felt heavy is becoming lighter. What felt stalled is regaining movement. These shifts may feel subtle at first, but subtle does not mean weak. Subtle shifts often indicate that change is settling deeply rather than temporarily. You do not need to revisit the delay to understand the restoration. The delay has already served its purpose. The focus now is forward. God says restoration moves best when the past is released without resentment or regret. Reflection can inform, but dwelling can hinder. You are not being asked to analyze what went wrong. You are being invited to receive what is right. Archangel Michael confirms that restoration does not erase memory, it redeems it. You will remember the waiting, but it will no longer carry weight. You will recall the pressure, but it will no longer define you. That is how you know restoration is real. It changes how the past feels, not just how the future looks. Restoration is still fully available because alignment is still active. Nothing has closed. Nothing has been revoked. Nothing has expired. What God initiated when you made that decision is still unfolding. And what unfolds next depends not on effort, but on continued agreement. Restoration is not fragile. It is responsive. And right now, it is responding to you. Now it is important to understand how delay becomes locked in, not by God, but by agreement. This is where clarity must replace assumption. Delay is never sealed by heaven as punishment. It is sealed when hesitation is allowed to settle into acceptance. Archangel Michael speaks plainly here because this is where many well-intentioned people lose momentum without realizing it. They do not choose delay deliberately. They simply stop resisting it. Delay becomes fixed when waiting turns into identity. When a person begins to see themselves as still waiting instead of already aligned, something subtle but powerful shifts. The mind adjusts. Expectations lower. Urgency fades. And what was once temporary begins to feel normal. God says this is not condemnation. It is awareness. What you normalize, you unconsciously agree with. One of the most common ways delay locks in is through mental postponement. Thoughts like, "I'll revisit this later," or "maybe this isn't the right time," sound reasonable, even wise. But Archangel Michael warns that timing sensitivity matters. There are moments when later is not neutral. It is retreat disguised as patience. Discernment is knowing when waiting is obedience and when it is avoidance. Another way delay becomes fixed is through over-spiritualizing hesitation. People say they are waiting for peace, waiting for a sign, or waiting for confirmation. And in reality, confirmation already came through the decision they made. God says signs often follow alignment, not precede it. Waiting for reassurance after alignment has already been given can quietly undo what was set in motion. Archangel Michael explains that the unseen realm does not need dramatic rebellion to regain leverage. It only needs agreement to slow down. When alignment pauses, momentum weakens. When momentum weakens, delay feels justified. And when delay feels justified, it settles in comfortably. Delay also locks in when fear is treated as wisdom. Fear speaks softly. It uses logic. It frames itself as caution. But caution that consistently leads away from alignment is not wisdom. It is resistance wearing a familiar voice. God says wisdom brings clarity, not paralysis. When thought patterns consistently lead you to postpone obedience, they are not protecting you. They are containing you. Another subtle trap is comparison. Looking at others' timing, progress, or outcomes can make delay feel acceptable. Maybe this just takes longer for me. Maybe this isn't my season yet. Archangel Michael warns that comparison dilutes personal authority. Your alignment is specific. Your timing is intentional. Measuring it against others blurs urgency and weakens resolve. Delay can also lock in through disappointment. When expectations are unmet, disappointment can quietly convince you to stop expecting altogether. This feels like emotional self-protection, but spiritually, it creates passivity. God says hope deferred affects the heart not because hope is dangerous, but because disengagement is. Restoration requires expectation to remain alive, even when timing shifts. One of the most dangerous forms of agreement with delay is silence. Internal silence, where you stop affirming what you know is true. You do not speak against alignment, but you stop reinforcing it. Archangel Michael reveals that silence is not neutral in moments of decision. What you do not reinforce weakens over time. God emphasizes this point gently, but firmly. Delay locks in when you stop choosing. Not when you choose wrongly, but when you stop choosing at all. Alignment is not a one-time act. It is a maintained posture. Maintenance does not require effort, but it does require awareness. Waiting for motivation is another trap. Motivation comes and goes. Authority remains. If alignment depends on how you feel, it will fluctuate. God says obedience rooted in clarity is stronger than obedience fueled by emotion. Emotion fades. Clarity angers. Archangel Michael also warns against reopening internal debates that were already settled. Replaying old questions, revisiting resolved doubts, or mentally renegotiating decisions weakens alignment. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. But awareness allows you to interrupt this pattern before it settles. Delay becomes locked when people mistake stillness for stagnation. Stillness can be powerful when it is intentional. Stagnation is stillness without agreement. God says you are not stagnant right now, but you must guard against interpreting quiet as absence. Quiet often means work is happening where you cannot see it. The enemy does not need to convince you to walk away. It only needs to convince you to wait indefinitely. Indefinite waiting feels safe because it avoids risk. But alignment always carries movement. Even when external circumstances appear unchanged, internal agreement keeps momentum alive. God is revealing this not to alarm you, but to empower you. Awareness breaks passive agreement. Once you see how delay attempts to settle in, you can refuse it without striving. Refusal does not require confrontation. It requires clarity. Archangel Michael assures you that delay has no authority unless you grant it permission. Permission is not always spoken. It is often assumed. When you assume delay is inevitable, it becomes influential. When you recognize it as optional, it loses power. You are not being warned because you are failing. You are being warned because you are close. Delay becomes most persuasive when restoration is near. That is why this understanding matters now. Alignment is not fragile, but it must be maintained. Delay is not powerful, but it becomes persistent when unchallenged. And the way you challenge it is not through effort, but through agreement. What you agree with next will determine whether delay remains temporary or becomes settled. A window is narrow, but it is still open. God wants you to understand this not as a threat, but as mercy. Narrow windows are not designed to exclude. They are designed to focus. When heaven narrows a moment, it is because clarity is available and outcome is near. Archangel Michael explains that wide seasons allow for wandering, but narrow windows call for alignment. This is one of those moments. A narrow window does not mean you have little time left. It means distraction matters more than usual. It means small shifts in posture have larger impact. It means awareness carries unusual weight. God is not rushing you. He is inviting you to be present. Presence is what keeps a window open. Many people fear narrow windows because they assume pressure equals loss. But God says narrow windows often appear right before restoration settles. They are confirmation points, not cutoff points. They ensure that what is about to manifest is received intentionally, not accidentally. Restoration received without awareness is often mishandled. Restoration received with clarity is protected. Archangel Michael reveals that this window exists because two outcomes are both possible, not because either is inevitable. Restoration is available. Delay is still optional. A window exists to allow choice to finalize direction. Heaven honors choice deeply. That is why moments like this are handled with care. You may feel a gentle urgency as you listen. That urgency is not anxiety. It is alignment calling for attention. God often speaks softly in narrow windows because he is not trying to convince you. He is confirming you. You already know what this moment is about. This message is not introducing something new. It is reinforcing what has already been stirred within you. The window is narrow because alignment is already close. Wide windows often indicate preparation is still ongoing. Narrow windows indicate readiness. God says you would not be hearing this if you were not ready. Readiness does not mean perfection. It means willingness. It means steadiness. It means the ability to remain aligned without constant reassurance. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this window is merciful because it prevents prolonged confusion. It brings things to a point. It clarifies. It simplifies. Instead of endless waiting, it offers resolution. Instead of constant questioning, it invites agreement. What keeps the window open is not effort, but intention. Intention anchors attention. Attention reinforces alignment. Alignment stabilizes outcome. This is why God keeps drawing your awareness back to the present moment, not to overwhelm you, but to anchor you. You are not being asked to make a new decision. You are being asked to reaffirm an existing one. Reaffirmation is powerful because it closes the door to renegotiation. Archangel Michael warns that renegotiation is how narrow windows widen into delay. When people begin revisiting what was already settled, momentum slows. The narrowness of this window also means that clarity is available without confusion. This is not a moment for mixed signals. God is not sending conflicting messages. If you feel torn, the tension is not coming from heaven. Heaven speaks with peace, even when urgency is present. Peace does not remove importance. It removes panic. God says this window is open because restoration is ready to move from unseen to seen. What has been shifting behind the scenes is approaching manifestation. But manifestation responds to agreement. Agreement must be present when the window is open, not after it closes. Archangel Michael reassures you that missing a window does not mean God abandons you. But honoring a window allows things to unfold with less resistance. Mercy remains either way, but peace flows more freely when alignment is timely. This is why the enemy tries hardest to distract during narrow windows. Not through obvious temptation, but through busyness, overthinking, or emotional noise. Anything that pulls attention away from presence weakens alignment. But you are not powerless here. Awareness itself is resistance. God says staying present does not require silence or stillness in your environment. It requires stillness in agreement. You can be moving externally and still be anchored internally. That anchoring is what keeps the window open. Do not measure this moment by how intense it feels. Measure it by how clear it feels. Clarity is heaven's signature in narrow windows. If something feels clear, steady, and grounded, that is where alignment rests. Before moving further, receive this blessing with intention. Type "I receive alignment" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 614 is now activated. This is a declaration of readiness and agreement. This narrow window you are hearing about is not just for your life. It is for every soul God is reaching through this message. When you sow into this work, you are lighting a flame that travels farther than you can see. Just as Scripture says the light shines and darkness cannot overcome it. I feel led to say this directly to you. Your obedience in giving becomes a voice that speaks when we cannot be there physically. Super thanks. Channel membership. or PayPal giving, link in the description and shown by the QR code, are not transactions. They are seeds released in a moment of alignment. Do not delay what God is prompting now, because this is how rivers are opened in dry places. I bless every giver with overflow, protection, and divine acceleration. Act now, and let heaven mark your obedience. This is the call to respond, not later, not when things feel clearer, but now, while alignment is active and awareness is sharp. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this moment is not about observation. It is about participation. Participation does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a quiet but intentional response that says, "I am still aligned." Heaven responds to participation because participation confirms agreement. God says many people receive powerful revelation, feel stirred, and then wait for circumstances to shift before responding. But spiritual order works differently. Response often precedes manifestation. When you respond while things are still forming, you signal trust. You declare that alignment is not dependent on visible proof. That declaration carries authority. This call is not about pressure. It is about clarity. Clarity invites action because action solidifies direction. Archangel Michael explains that response is how alignment moves from internal awareness into external confirmation. When alignment stays internal only, it remains vulnerable to distraction. When alignment is expressed, it becomes anchored. This is why moments like this matter. You are not being asked to change your entire life today. You are being asked to confirm what you already know. Confirmation is powerful because it closes internal debates. It tells the unseen realm that this is not a passing thought or an emotional reaction. It is a settled position. God often uses simple acts of response to seal complex spiritual shifts. This is why engagement matters. When you like this message, you are not interacting with an algorithm. You are reinforcing agreement. When you share it, you are extending alignment outward. When you subscribe, you are choosing continued awareness. And when you comment, even briefly, you are participating rather than observing. These actions are not about numbers. They are about momentum. Momentum grows when alignment is expressed consistently. Archangel Michael warns that passivity in moments like this does not mean neutrality. It often means momentum slows unnecessarily. Response keeps movement alive. If you feel prompted to respond, do not dismiss that prompting as insignificant. Small obediences carry weight when timing is precise. God says this is a precise moment. Precision does not require intensity. It requires sincerity. You may be tempted to think, "I'll respond later," or "this isn't necessary." But understand this, response now is easier than response later because alignment is fresh. Later invites distraction. Later invites overthinking. Now invites clarity. This is not about proving faith. It is about practicing it. Faith expressed remains active. Faith unexpressed often becomes theoretical. Archangel Michael emphasizes that faith is strengthened through movement, not analysis. Responding now also positions you as a witness, not just to others but to yourself. When you look back, you will remember that you did not hesitate in this moment. That memory strengthens future alignment. It builds confidence. It reduces fear. God is not asking you to respond out of obligation. He is inviting you to respond out of recognition. Recognition that something is shifting. Recognition that restoration is near. Recognition that delay no longer has authority unless it is allowed. This call is also protective. Responding now guards against drifting later. Drift rarely feels like rebellion. It feels like distraction. Response interrupts that pattern. It recenters attention. It brings awareness back to alignment. If this message resonates, take action. Like the video. Share it with someone who may be standing in a similar moment. Subscribe if you recognize that these messages are part of how God keeps you alert and aligned. Leave a comment, not to explain everything, but to mark the moment. Simple words are enough. God says your response does not need to be perfect. It needs to be present. Presence is what heaven responds to. Presence is what keeps momentum moving forward. Archangel Michael also reminds you that responding now does not mean everything changes instantly. It means direction is confirmed. Confirmation allows unfolding to happen with less resistance. It removes unnecessary friction. If you feel a pull to stay engaged, honor that. Engagement is not distraction here. It is alignment. This is how spiritual moments transition into lived reality. And hold this close. What comes next brings clarity you did not expect. This is not the end of the message. It is the turning point. When you choose alignment, something immediate begins to happen, even if it is not yet visible. God says alignment stabilizes the unseen before it transforms the seen. This is why choosing alignment does not always feel dramatic at first. It feels grounding. It feels settling. It feels like something internal clicks into place. That internal stabilization is not small. It is the foundation upon which visible change is built. Archangel Michael reveals that when alignment is chosen and maintained, resistance loses leverage. Resistance feeds on inconsistency. It gains influence when agreement wavers. But when alignment is firm, resistance has nothing to attach itself to. It may still make noise, but it cannot redirect momentum. That is why clarity often follows alignment quickly. Confusion fades when agreement is settled. One of the first things that happens when alignment is chosen is spiritual stabilization. Emotional swings lessen. Mental noise quiets. Not because circumstances have fully changed, but because authority hath been re-established internally. God says peace is not the absence of pressure. It is the presence of alignment. When alignment is active, pressure no longer dictates direction. Momentum also begins to replace stagnation. Stagnation feels heavy because nothing is moving. Momentum feels lighter even before outcomes appear. You may notice subtle shifts, renewed motivation, unexpected clarity, or opportunities that seem to align without force. These are signs that the unseen realm is cooperating again. Archangel Michael emphasizes that momentum does not require you to push. It carries you when alignment is correct. This is why striving often feels exhausting. Striving attempts to move what alignment would carry effortlessly. When you choose alignment, you step into cooperation rather than effort. Another result of alignment is peace becoming confirmation. You no longer need constant reassurance because peace itself affirms direction. This peace is not passive. It is grounded. It allows you to move forward without anxiety. God says when peace accompanies a direction, it is often a sign that resistance no longer has authority there. Alignment also restores flow. What once felt blocked begins to move again. Conversations open. Ideas connect. Timing improves. These changes may appear ordinary on the surface, but spiritually, they indicate restored cooperation between intention and outcome. Archangel Michael reveals that alignment strengthens discernment. When you are aligned, distractions are easier to recognize. You are less reactive. You respond instead of react. This protects restoration from being undermined by impulse or fear. Another important shift is that alignment restores trust, both trust in God and trust in yourself. Delay often erodes self-trust. You begin to question your ability to hear clearly or decide wisely. Alignment rebuilds that trust quietly. You begin to feel confident again, not arrogant, but steady. God says alignment also recalibrates timing. Things begin to unfold at the right pace, not rushed and not stalled. You stop forcing outcomes and stop fearing delay. Timing becomes something you cooperate with instead of something you fight. When alignment is chosen, the unseen realm responds with support. Assistance becomes available. Resources align. Protection increases. This does not mean challenges disappear, but challenges lose their power to derail you. They become obstacles you navigate, not walls that stop you. Archangel Michael explains that alignment also changes how you experience waiting. Waiting no longer feels empty. It feels purposeful. You understand that something is unfolding even when you cannot see it. This understanding preserves peace and prevents discouragement. Alignment also strengthens boundaries. You become less tolerant of what drains you. You say no more easily. You protect your time and energy without guilt. These changes may feel personal, but they have spiritual impact. Boundaries protect restoration. God says one of the clearest signs alignment hath been chosen is consistency. You stop starting and stopping. You move steadily, even slowly, but without retreat. Consistency builds trust in the unseen realm. It confirms that authority is stable. Another result of alignment is that fear loses its voice. Fear may still appear, but it no longer dictates decisions. You recognize it without obeying it. This is freedom. Freedom is not fearlessness. It is choice without fear's control. Archangel Michael emphasizes that alignment does not mean life becomes predictable. It means life becomes directed. Direction gives meaning to movement, even when the path curves. You trust the direction enough to keep moving. God says alignment also restores joy. Not excitement, but deep contentment. You feel connected again, to purpose, to clarity, to peace. Joy returns when resistance loses influence. When alignment is chosen, restoration does not arrive as chaos. It arrives as order. Things begin to make sense. Pieces fit. You no longer feel like you are fighting yourself. This is why alignment matters so much. It is not about forcing outcomes. It is about creating the conditions where outcomes unfold naturally. God does not rush restoration. He stabilizes it. Archangel Michael confirms that what you experience after alignment is not temporary relief. It is structural change. Something has been corrected at the foundation level, and what is built on a corrected foundation lasts. Choosing alignment does not end the journey. It secures it. And from this place, what unfolds next will be steadier, clearer, and protected. Now God brings everything into focus with a final, gentle instruction for this moment. It is not complicated. It is not heavy. It is not demanding. Archangel Michael emphasizes that when heaven gives final instruction, it often comes in simplicity, because simplicity leaves no room for confusion. Complexity invites hesitation. Simplicity invites obedience. God is not asking you to fix anything right now. He is not asking you to explain, justify, or analyze what has happened. He is asking you to trust what has already been revealed. Trust, in this moment, is not emotional confidence. It is quiet consent. It is the decision to stop wrestling internally and allow alignment to remain settled. This instruction is about staying where you are, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Do not rush ahead. Do not revisit the past. Do not rehearse worst-case scenarios. Archangel Michael warns that the temptation now is to overthink what has already been clarified. Overthinking is not discernment. It is fear trying to regain influence through logic. God says the greatest act of obedience in this moment is restraint. Restraint from doubting. Restraint from self-correction. Restraint from reopening questions that were already answered. Many people believe obedience always looks like action, but sometimes obedience looks like stillness that refuses to be shaken. This is why the instruction feels almost too simple. Remain aligned. Remain aware. Remain present. Do not complicate what God has already made clear. Clarity has been given. Now it must be protected. Archangel Michael explains that trust stabilizes spiritual movement. When you trust, you stop interfering with what is unfolding. You stop pulling at timing. You stop measuring progress constantly. You allow restoration to arrive in its proper form rather than forcing it into your expectations. God says trust here means releasing the need to control outcome. Control often disguises itself as responsibility, but in moments like this, control interrupts flow. Restoration flows best when it is not micromanaged. Alignment invites cooperation. Control invites resistance. You may feel an urge to do something to make sure nothing goes wrong. That urge is understandable, but it is not required. God has not brought you this far to leave you without guidance. What you need now is not effort, but confidence in what has already been set in motion. This instruction also includes guarding your inner dialogue. What you say to yourself in the coming moments matters. Speak agreement internally, even if nothing changes outwardly yet. Agreement reinforces alignment. Silence filled with trust is more powerful than words filled with anxiety. Archangel Michael reminds you that obedience is not proven by intensity. It is proven by consistency. Consistency does not mean constant action. It means not deviating when pressure tries to redirect you. Stay steady. Stay anchored. God is not measuring you by productivity right now. He is measuring alignment. Are you resisting the urge to retreat mentally? Are you refusing to downgrade expectation? Are you choosing trust over speculation? These quiet choices matter more than visible activity. This instruction also carries reassurance. You are not alone in this moment. Heaven is attentive. Assistance is present. Protection is active. You are not being asked to hold everything together by yourself. You are being asked to allow what is already aligned to continue unfolding. Archangel Michael emphasizes that trust shortens transition. When people trust, processes complete faster because resistance is removed. When people hesitate, processes slow because interference increases. Trust is not passive, it is cooperative. God says if uncertainty tries to surface, do not wrestle it. Acknowledge it, then return to alignment. You do not need to silence every thought. You only need to choose which ones you agree with. Agreement determines direction. This final instruction is also about peace. Not manufactured peace, but peace that comes from knowing you are where you are meant to be. If peace feels accessible right now, receive it. That peace is confirmation. It is heaven's way of saying, you are aligned. Do not underestimate the power of simple obedience. History, both spiritual and personal, is filled with moments where outcomes shifted not because of grand actions, but because someone trusted when it would have been easier to doubt. God says you are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where alignment placed you. And what unfolds next will unfold from this position of steadiness, not striving. Archangel Michael's final emphasis here is this: remain steady a little longer. Not because something is fragile, but because something is settling. Settling creates permanence. And permanence is what heaven is establishing now. This instruction does not end the journey. It secures it. And from this place of trust, what comes next will not need to be forced. It will arrive. Now everything comes together. God brings this message to a close not with fear, but with assurance. What began with urgency ends with peace, because urgency was never meant to alarm you. It was meant to position you. Archangel Michael stands as a witness to what has already shifted, what is currently settling, and what is about to be restored. This was never a moment of loss. It was a moment of decision, alignment, and confirmation. February 11th was the turning point. The decision you made on or around that time was not overlooked. It was not delayed in its impact. It reached the unseen realm immediately, and the response has been unfolding ever since. What followed, the pressure, the clarity, the warnings, the narrow window, were not signs of instability, but signs of proximity. When outcomes draw near, heaven speaks plainly. God wants you to leave this message with certainty, not questions. You are not wondering anymore whether your decision mattered. It did. You are not guessing whether restoration is possible. It did. You are not standing at the edge of something fragile. You are standing at the threshold of something stabilized. Archangel Michael confirms that protection has been active throughout this entire process. Even when you felt uncertain, guarded boundaries were in place. Even when delay lingered, it did not have authority to destroy, only to pause. And that pause has now served its purpose. What needed to be strengthened have been strengthened. What needed to be clarified has been clarified. This message was never about rushing you into action. It was about anchoring you in truth. Truth that delay was not punishment. Truth that restoration was never canceled. Truth that your alignment carried more authority than you realized. And truth that moments like these are not common. They are merciful. God says peace is now your confirmation. Not emotional excitement. Not dramatic signs. Peace. A settled knowing. A quiet confidence. That peace signals that alignment has been maintained. It tells you that what was at risk has now been secured. You may not see immediate external changes the moment this message ends. That does not mean nothing happened. It means something real has settled deeply. Deep work often produces lasting fruit rather than instant spectacle. And what God restores in your life is meant to last. Archangel Michael assures you that from this point forward, movement will feel steadier. You will notice less internal resistance. Decisions will feel clearer. Waiting will feel lighter. These are not coincidences. They are evidence that agreement has been reinforced. This closing is not the end of something. It is the beginning of ease. Not ease without responsibility, but ease without striving. God does not call you to carry what He is already carrying for you. Alignment allows partnership. Trust allows flow. As this message concludes, receive this final blessing with intention. Type "I am aligned" in the comments if this message resonated with you. Blessing code 902 is now activated. This blessing seals steadiness, clarity, and restored flow over your life. What you have just received is not only for you. It is a word God is sending to many, and He is using this channel as the vessel. When Scripture says that those who water others will themselves be watered, this is what it means in real time. I am speaking to you directly now. Your support through super thanks, channel membership, or PayPal is a prophetic act that keeps this stream of truth flowing to souls who are still waiting for clarity. The PayPal link is in the description. And the QR code you see is not by accident. It is an open door. Do not delay obedience when God is prompting generosity, because giving in moments like this unlocks harvest beyond measure. I release blessing over every giver, that your alignment multiplies, your provision increases, and your peace remains guarded. Act now, and let heaven record your faithfulness. This message ends with assurance. What was shifted remains shifted. What was aligned remains aligned. And what is being restored will not be lost again. You are covered. You are positioned. And what comes next will arrive in peace,